Thank you very much for joining us and coming to Bangkok, to this beautiful and vibrant city. So it's a pleasure to see you all here. I think that today's panel is going to be about the liquidity for the intent-based systems. Oh, hey, Markus. Actually, Paulina, can we have maybe one more chair if possible? Is it okay? Yeah, thank you. So just a second. Yeah, we can. Yeah, you can do it if you can. Okay, cool. Yeah. So my name is Misha. I'm the co-founder of Liquorice, and Liquorice is the unified layer that unifies the liquidity from the market makers to the solvers, and also provides some yield opportunities for the LP providers. And the purpose of this talk is talk about the liquidity in the intent-based system, so the private liquidity, how the solvers see it, how the market makers see it, how maybe LP providers can see it, and I think that we can open up with a round of introductions. I think Markus, you're going to be the first, as you're gonna last in the panel. So please go ahead, and we will just pass it through.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Hey, I'm Markus, founder of Propellerheads, and we've been solvers for quite a while. Before that, also a little bit of searching, and now we're mainly building infrastructure for solvers, helping to index, simulate, and execute more easily on chain. We're doing this with a couple of chains, and we're also building new products in the TE stack that will be coming soon, but that's a bit too early to talk about.
Thank you. Tim.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim. I'm at GSR. So GSR is a crypto market making firm. So we our primary role is token market making for our clients. Also quite active as a prop trading firm and VC firm as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikita. I'm co-founder of Barter. So Barter is a solver on CowSwap, Bebop, Uniswap X, and we've been trying to unify liquidity and build infrastructure and evolve solving into a more efficient layer for the end users.
Hi, I'm Howe, one of the co-founders of Enso. We're building an intent engine. We also run solvers, and the intent engine allows anyone to contribute to this. You can envision it as a master solver.
Hey everyone, I'm Felix, co-founder of GlueX. GlueX is a solver on CowSwap. We like to see ourselves as this, let's say, abstraction layer where we just allow the user to interact with any protocol in DeFi across any chain, and just solving is one of the things that stem out of this abstraction capability.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I think we will kick off the panel with I think one of the main questions. It's going to be the question to both solvers and the market makers, and I think that the question is how important it is for the solver to have its own inventory. I think that we already discussed it. So maybe we will just get your view on the question, and then I will ask Tim about is the solving and actually market making is the same thing, because a lot of people are just confusing solving with the market makers, and a lot of people say that market makers are solvers. So I would like to get your opinion on that point, and do you guys want to use your inventory, and what's the difference, the principal difference between the solvers and market makers?
Yeah, so like I said while introducing ourselves, we like to see ourselves as an abstraction layer, like, let's say, complexity abstraction layer, where the user just can come to us and doesn't need to know anything about how they can interact with all of these different protocols on DeFi. And we're talking about, like protocols that are just automated market makers, like the typical DEX, but we're also talking now about lending pools, yield pools, and then anything that comes, anything new that may come. So that for us is our core, and I think that as a solver, or like what we denominate as solver, or what we have understood as being a solver, that's what we think that's supposed to be. So becoming this abstraction layer. Yes, a big component of that is actually running a lot of infra and like making a lot of integrations, because in order to abstract the complexity for the user, well, first of all, you need to have infrastructure, meaning you need to index these contracts, you need to understand how to interact with them. So for example, if it's a lending vault, I need to know how to deposit on the vault. I need to know how much I'm going to receive in exchange. So like all of these questions are the things that a solver is meant to actually understand, and not only on one chain, but also on multiple chains. And then if you do this very well multiple times, you really get to a point of DeFi, which is enable things like you're simply moving from one depth position to the other in an atomic transaction, which in TradFi will be impossible. So that is for me what is to be a solver today. Now the thing is, the solver term is being overused, like used everywhere, right? Now in across, for example, we have a type of solving which is bridging, like solving for bridging. And on CowSwap, this is a different type of solving. Like, and CowSwap, this happens differently. Main thing is, at least right now, the main distinction is that solving on across or solving for bridging, you need to hold inventory because that is not done atomically. And solving on CowSwap or on solo chain solving, you can do it atomically. So you can do pretty much everything in one settlement, as long as the framework in which you are settling or solving for is flexible enough to do that. So yeah, this is where the question arises. So do me or us as GlueX, if we want to start solving on a bridge like across, should we then take positions on tokens so that we can actually start solving over there? On our side, and this is our point of view, just simply we're not going to do that. So because again, I see ourselves as this abstraction layer, not as a market maker, and we don't want to be a market maker. So we're just really, yeah, I'll move on to let you give your point of view. And
yeah, Tim, can you tell us what do you think about the market maker job, and are the market makers actually competitive in solving, like competing with the traditional solvers?
So, I mean, I thought Felix's point about integrations is right on point and very relevant to us. So if you're going to solve using on-chain sources of liquidity, you need to do a lot of integrations. You need to cover as many bases as possible to try and get the best price. So I think your ability to be a good solver and generate a good surplus is a function of how much integration work you've done. If you have private sources of liquidity, and this is, I think, an area where GSR have an advantage in some cases, then you're effectively able to price using an off-chain source. So price discovery occurs off-chain. Now, this can probably work for the majors, but perhaps not the longer tail. But from our perspective, if we're able to leverage an off-chain price source, that's really where our edge is, because we really don't have the resourcing to do all of these on-chain integrations. Our focus is on the PMM side of things. I understand that there are various solutions. I know that you guys, Liquorice, are looking at sort of aggregation functionality, and I know that Felix's team are doing so as well. So for us, that's the right combination. Our engineering team don't have to focus on all of these on-chain AMM integrations. We can sort of leverage protocols that allow us to aggregate that, or have done that lifting for us already, and we can focus on using off-chain pricing, and I think this is a strength of GSR. I mean, we have something like around about 50 CFI integrations, so we have good integrations with off-chain liquidity sources. We've got inventory there, so that's really our edge. If we're spending too much time and too many engineering resources doing the on-chain integration, we're not going to be able to scale. So really taking advantage of what some of the other teams here are building is going to be really useful to us.
Yeah, nice. Markus, please, if you want to add something.
I would like to summarize over these 2 points. I think maybe we're like forcing ourselves into like a false dichotomy between solvers and market making. And I think the descriptions that Felix and Tim gave are pretty straight to the point, that solving is atomic use of on-chain liquidity, and market making is holding inventory and crossing domains. And if we would keep to these definitions, and we write quite simple, because then as soon as a solver takes on inventory, he's no longer a solver, he's basically a market maker. And then things are simple. And if you look at the statistics today on chain, on how the majority of order flow actually gets settled, it's not an either or. It's many cases, on most of cases, a collaboration between solvers and between market makers, where the solvers take care of the routing math, and then integrate the quotes from the market makers and make a joint bundle. And often you look at these statistics and you think that there's market makers competing with solvers, but it's actually solvers using market makers, and together they collaborate. And I think this is the classical economic of specialization. Each of these tasks is hard enough for one team, and I think the teams who have tried to do both have realized that it is distracting them from their core competency, and they no longer are competitive in their core competency. So the natural conclusion is you focus and then you collaborate.
Cool. Thank you. Nikita, I have a question for you maybe. So if you want to add something to the previous point, yeah.
Let's new one.
Okay. Yeah, maybe for you and Connor, the question that I have, if you guys think about using using the private liquidity for the one-to-one swaps, like stablecoin to stablecoin, or maybe like staked Ethereum to the other version of the staked Ethereum, do you guys consider ever to using like your own liquidity for this type of swaps, or these like packed assets? So what's your point on the packed assets, basically?
So let's rewind a little bit and talk about private liquidity. So private liquidity is an issue for like DeFi in general, because it increases fragmentation, and private liquidity is very good for a party that holds it, but very bad for everyone else, because no one else can tap into it. And it can create like barriers, it creates inefficiency, it can just affect the whole pipeline, and you no longer want to swap in DeFi, you just go to centralized exchanges. So we don't really like it, and we are trying to avoid it as much as possible. However, like solver margins are going down, and the competition is at its peak probably. We have over 25 active solver teams on CowSwap and other similar systems, and you have to look for every possible edge you can get. And the idea, potentially, it's a way to go. And some solvers are already using it. Some solvers plan to start doing it, and especially if you dive into other, for example, cross-chain solving, you already start to have inventory, you need to manage risk, you might start using it for atomic swaps as well. So it's a potential route, but from our team's point of view, it's not a good one in the long run for DeFi, and not something we are trying to do. So that's my take.
Okay, Connor?
Yeah, to answer your question bluntly, no, we're not going to do it. Our primary focus has been DeFi aggregation. So we were the first solver in the ecosystem that would aggregate lending, borrowing, swapping, LSTs, LRTs, vaults, and so forth. And that's kind of our primary use case, so on-chain. We were happy to plug into market makers themselves, but I think maybe 8-9 months ago, all of us were on certain Twitter spaces talking about turning into market makers, using our own inventory, but really it's a whole different game. And to be able to learn that, and there's a whole different risk appetite as well. And it's very different characteristics of a team to be able to do that. So for us, primarily, we focus on-chain. Now within Enso itself, that doesn't mean we can't plug into other people that can leverage and do this. Some solvers have more exclusive relationships, i.e. they block other solvers from using that market makers. Some don't, they all plug into the same one. But for us, primarily, we focus on-chain. But we're happy to plug into others.
Okay, thank you guys. Maybe one more point that I would like to discuss here is the difference between the AMMs and the private liquidity. Because we all agree that there are a lot of money that is sitting in the Uniswap pools, and these are basically dumb money, especially when we're talking about like the most liquid pairs like ETH versus stable coins, or something like mem coins versus stable coins. So basically there is a lot of impermanent loss happening there. And what do you see, guys, as where the market is actually moving on in the future? Because there is a kind of a competition between this public on-chain liquidity sitting in the AMMs and the liquidity from the market makers, for example, in the private wallets. So what do you think? The perfect split is going to be for the next couple of years, maybe, or is there any chance that AMMs will survive? So what's your point, Felix?
Yeah. So. On our side, the opinion on how liquidity will be available, I think what's going to happen is, and this is our own point of view, so B4 intents right? You would only be able to tap into liquidity through directly, right? Transactions. So I want to execute my transaction. I will get maybe a route from 1inch or any text aggregator, or I will go directly to the UI of Uniswap, and then I interact directly with the liquidity pool. And so this is what the purpose of the AMM was for, because the AMM was pretty much, as it's defined, is the automated market maker. I don't know what may come to me. I don't know in which context. I'm just going to define my pricing mechanism, and I'm going to, well, I hope that it's the best possible in every context. And that works in this permissionless environment where you expect anybody at any point in time to interact and try to get your liquidity. In an environment where, in which we now operate, which is the intent space, that changes. Like in an intent space, the liquidity provider can interact with a solver. So we can, as a solver, there's a window in which there's a decision-making window in which the user comes and interacts with a venue like CowSwap or any other intent settlement layer, and in which the user comes in, asks for a quote, and then a solver provides that quote. And where the solver sources that pricing, where the solver sources that liquidity, that there's more room, more space to work together with the liquidity provider. So we see an example of this already with a team called Valantis. So these guys, they created this modular framework for decentralized exchanges, and the first DEX they launch is pretty much that. So it is a decentralized exchange that is acts as it's called a hybrid. It's a hybrid pool, but where part of that is AMM, like the typical UniV3, and the other part is an RFQ. So they have Arrakis acting as basically this this market maker that interacts with us on top of the AMM component. We might provide him a better price. By being an RFQ, they also understand prices of chain. So they protect the user better for LPR. And so this is an evolution. And I think liquidity is going to migrate towards that. At least if liquidity, if all interactions, all executions start going through intents, I think we'll see less and less liquidity being locked in pools that are only automated market makers. And they're going to start really being more into.
So it's going to migrate, in your opinion, right? It's so the liquidity is going to migrate from these traditional pools to the more.
It's going to be on vaults, on chain, permissionless vaults, but the market making mechanism is not going to be automated. And there might be an underlying component, like for example, we see CowAMM. CowAMM is similar. Like there is a off-chain component, the solvers actually fighting to improve the quote, and maybe the fallback element is an automated market maker, right? Which is still there to ensure some level of baseline, but it has definitely now an off-chain component that helps them protect for LPR and any of theirs, right? Yeah, there's
yeah.
To kind of add on to this one, I think the question is who's doing this LPing, right? Is it dumb money, or is it investors of Uniswap to then pump up a TVL to then keep a token price, right? Do we inherently know who they are? No, we don't. So first we need to understand their behavior, why they're doing this. But to kind of answer your question of where I see this going, I see more like base assets will be market makers. Long tail assets will be provided by solvers, and they will combine this together, right? That's where the space of intent, kind of combining this, will give a better user experience ultimately at the end of the day. I don't see large funds sitting in LPs in a couple of years if we understand who those users are that are LPing, and then convince them to put money elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tim, do you guys work with traditional AMMs? Like, do you provide capital, maybe hedge it out, maybe take it?
We do. So as part of our market making deals with token projects that we work with, we typically offer market making on CeFi and market making on DeFi, and that's usually Uniswap v3 LPing. Now, the way we make that work, and the only way we can make that work, is that we're essentially hedging our impermanent loss on some other venue, typically off-chain. So if we don't have an off-chain venue, we can't do that hedging, and we won't support it. Typically, the tokens that we LP with are borrowed from our clients as well. So it's their capital. We do the deployment. We set the ranges. We might move those ranges around. every time a swap comes in, we're listening out for that event, and we periodically use that information to hedge that LP position. So that's how we deal with the impermanent loss. But essentially, it's our clients' funds that we're LPing with.
Right. So you guys basically leverage now the contracts that you have with the clients, and that's the way you're gonna provide liquidity on the AMMs. Right. So do you have anything to add, Markus?
Sure. I think the current state and like the very near-term dynamics that we talked about, they don't look. At least I hope they look nothing like the final state. I think for DeFi we only really have one option for it to stay DeFi, which is for most of the liquidity or almost all the liquidity to be on chain in some form, whether it be a vault or an AMM. I think these are like rather similar, so you can call them AMMs. And I don't think CeFi should have a future in DeFi, also for DeFi tokens. And the reason being because there's, if you look at what are the advantages of CeFi, if we are correct, then they are UX and some smarter automation around the market making. Now, are AMMs going to get dumber or smarter? Right? I think the edge will just decrease. Both of these, the UX edge will decrease with better chains like Unichain, and the market making edge will decrease with smarter automation like Arrakis. And this is ultimately what we want, right? We don't want to create another TradFi. We built this whole thing so that we have it permissionlessly accessible, and that we can have I don't think this is the right expression, but that we can have people and we can basically pluralistically source the liquidity. That it is no longer a permissioned access. You have to be a market maker to provide liquidity and earn those fees. No, anybody can do it because the underlying mechanism is smart enough. I think this is the future that we originally came here for, that it is all on chain. If you want to do centralized market making, then just go to TradFi.
But will a user, let's say I can give a user, they get $50 cheaper going to a market maker, or they lose $50 going direct to DeFi. What do you think they're going to choose? Do you think they care? Or do you think you care philosophically about DeFi versus CeFi, or do the users even care?
There will be, it's about marginal, right? As long as I think every user who's using DeFi marginally cares about the philosophical aspect, right? The vibe, the alignment, marginally, but how much, right? Some people care more, some people less. But as soon as the gap between the on-chain pricing, the on-chain execution speed, and the how simple it is, right? The UX, as soon as the gap is small enough, then that marginal difference, the alignment, meaning I'm actually contributing to a censorship-resistant, permissionless, accessible system here, that will be enough to push over the edge. And then, of course, not everybody will onboard, but then it will make it an easy choice because the difference is marginal. Now the difference is not marginal. It's horrible UX, right? And it's very hard, and you get bad prices in many cases, and it's very insecure for most users. But as soon as that is marginal, then I think the flip will switch. Yeah.
Thanks, Markus. I think that I will pretty much align with you on the view that that's the not end state of the intents right now. And people still have to be able to invest passively in the LP pools. Because like the team mentioned, they have to hedge on the centralized exchanges when they manage liquidity as LP provider. And the point that we're doing in Liquorice is to allow LPs to just passively put money and to make it available for the solvers and for the market makers to settle the trades. So that point, I'm pretty much aligned. Thanks for that.
Just on the hedging piece, I mean, today we hedge on a CeFi venue. If there is a performant limit order book based on-chain venue, absolutely we'll look at hedging there if possible. So I think the futures potentially align.
Yeah, I think that if we're talking about order books on chain, it's completely different question, and it's completely like far away from the topic of this panel. But I would love to have a conversation.
I mean, I think our engineering team, we love EVM protocols most, but we absolutely integrate on non-EVM protocols as well. I mean, Solana, Sui, etc. There's more C-lob venues there. We'll see what happens when protocols like Monad and Mega come online, but maybe we can look at doing our AMM hedging on EVM protocols in the near future.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks. I think my next question would be to you, Nikita, maybe to start. Do believe in the cross-chain, and what's your stance on that? Because there is so much talking about the cross-chain swaps, about the cross-chain inventory. So what's your stance on that? Do you guys at Barter solve cross-chain, and what's your thought on that?
So, like, we really like cross-chain. That's what people want. Like, if you look historically, since 2021, a lot of people in DeFi, when those new L2s became popular, it was like a major use case, and everyone was asking, like, Uniswap, can you guys go on-chain, cross-chain, and eventually they did. However, cross-chain is not yet kind of like sophisticated enough, and it's very, very basic in terms of like actions and what you do. So you just move liquidity from one chain to another, and we need like better ways of doing that. And luckily we have enough like improvements that are happening at the technological stack, so it would be possible to do like atomically more difficult like use cases, more difficult swaps when you tap into various liquidity sources, and without paying absurd amount for gas, and without risking security. Because right now all the cross-chain venues, solvers take a lot of risks of reorgs, risks of inventory management and stuff like that. And this is being mitigated by newer systems that are emerging. And when that happens, maybe like in 1 year from now, I think cross-chain will be big. So like eventually we want to do it, we like it. We are not doing now because of the things I mentioned. So yeah.
Thank you. Connor, do you have any stance on that?
Is the future? I mean, users ultimately shouldn't care what chain they're operating on. They should just care about what they want to obtain, whether that's on ETH, Arbitrum, Solana. And one of the ways to do this is with intents and chain abstraction. Will we do it ourselves? We looked into it, and it costs like, it's 50K to start, and you can make very, very good APY. Primarily dbridge, I think is just Rockaway X is the primary solver market maker, right? That's where naming kind of gets a bit mixed up. There's very good profit in it. And in terms of like the actions that you can do, you are able today, if you're a solver and a cross, to combine any arbitrary call data with not only the, not bridging, but the ETH to Arbitrum to then go and directly deposit or lend and so forth. So for us, maybe in the future, but for now not, we would prefer to collaborate with somebody that is doing that to then use our call data for then entering into DeFi protocols. Again, that's kind of the mix between a market maker, holding inventory, all of that risk, versus executing on-chain.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Maybe the next question is to the Felix. So as the solvers guys, what the main obstacles are you guys facing when you're dealing with the cross-chain environment? I know that you got the point here. We also have Sergey here from Fusion, 1inch Fusion. Yeah, and what's the main problem you guys have like operating with the cross Fusion and all these cross-chain protocols?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just saying the same as we have just mentioned across the panel, and for everyone here is the inventory and that distinction between being a market maker, specialized on taking positions and understanding the risk of that position and the value changes, hedging and all of that, compared to just being a solver. I purposely, when I introduced GlueX, I introduced it as an abstraction layer or something. We abstract complexity from DeFi. And it's more than, I think, from a market maker point of view, it's more about enabling entering positions or opening positions into a specific set of tokens. A market maker will never just simply hold a position on every single token that's out there because of the risks. A solver, our goal as a solver is just then abstract the complexity and ensure that you can interact with every possible protocol on DeFi. So yeah, okay, so going back to your question, what's stopping us from pretty much like, yeah, entering that ball game is the need of inventory, because cross-chain intent is not atomic. There is the funds of the user on this new chain, so the user, they are locked on escrow for a period of time. You only get the funds after a specific amount of blocks. During that time, you as a solver or whoever you will need to have given the funds to the user, your funds, or funds from somewhere you may have been able to tap into. So there are some protocols that are coming up that in theory are going to allow us as solvers to tap into their liquidity. So basically we as solvers could be outsourcing that risk, the inventory risk, to these other protocols. And so we will then go back to what a solver should do, which is just understand maybe a venue like Fusion Plus, understand a venue like Across, what the protocol is, how they enable these cross-chain swaps, understand that, and connect it optimally to this new type of protocols that will be willing to provide liquidity
Right.
for that specific type of risk, for that specific type of settlement. So yeah, again, going back to this solving, being abstraction layer, understanding Fusion Plus, understanding this new type of protocol that will allow us to tap into the liquidity and connect them optimally, and ensuring that the user can just need to know anything about it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Markus? What's the problems?
Cross-chain is dead. Yeah, I mean, where are we? We're chain abstraction, right? So, yeah, I think be very careful in assuming. I'm just repeating what we said. Be very careful in assuming that solvers will hold this liquidity. They don't want to split it between market makers, fillers, and solvers. Make it composable. If you ever put more tasks on solvers, you will force more centralization, and your system will most likely not work because there's hardly anybody, or maybe nobody, who's willing to do it. Solvers have enough to do. Make it composable. Pick people who are willing to do this and whose job it is, like market makers, or automate it and have users take on the risk and get rewards for it. Yeah, but just don't push more complexity into that dark box that we call solvers, and they're just going to take care of it. It's not going to work.
Thanks. I think that's an interesting view. I think I have a more question for Tim. So maybe you can give us a light, because I think we all agree here that it's a job of market maker to manage inventory, and it's a job of solver to find the best on-chain route and plug in different types of liquidity, including the liquidity from the private players like market makers. So for you guys as market makers, what would be the biggest challenge dealing with inventory management on-chain? So you guys, do you have any specific pain points or maybe some problems that you are really think is a problem right now as a state of the market?
So, I mean, we're somewhat early. We're active on Uniswap X. We've been active for a couple of months now, and the way we decide what tokens to store on chain, it's quite rudimentary. We look at the top sort of 10, 15 most traded tokens, intersect that with our own inventory, and then we park that on chain. We move it from either a C5 venue or a custodian. It's quite simplistic, and I think we're in the process of scaling up. And as we scale up and we become more comfortable with Uniswap X, and we're also doing a 1-inch Fusion integration, as we become more comfortable with those integrations, I think we'll put some more time, resources, and thought into how we do that asset allocation. But at the moment, it's pretty simplistic. We're really just targeting the top 10, 12 or so sort of majors, not really touching the longer tail of things. But yeah, quite simple, and we're in a sort of scaling up phase, I would say, at the moment. So nothing especially elaborate.
Okay, thank you. I think we discussed almost all the questions. So I would like to thank all the panelists. Thank you for your thank you for coming here, and thank you for our beautiful listeners, and thanks for listening to our panel. Thank you.